COVID-19 has basically shut down everything. Shops are closed, everybody who can work from home is, and everybody who can't either isn't working or is working in literal, life-threatening conditions. So, in the grim darkness of the far future that lies before us, what is a tabletop wargamer to do? Hi, my name's Samantha, and I'm sort of a Warhammer fan. You know, I only named myself after a chapter of Space Marines, have the symbols of 2 chapters on my banner art, and tried, briefly, to make a weekly Warhammer review show, which, as well as having spent literal hundreds of dollars on Warhammer licensed video games, and for both of our sakes, let's not even mention the models. However, I, along with thousands of other Warhammer fanatics, are at a crossroads. Our hobby is centered around a tabletop wargame. Tabletop, as in a physical table in a physical location, more than likely outside our house, definitely with a group of other people. How are we to indulge in our massive model money pit if we're all stuck indoors? Well, strap yourselves in, because there are a multitude of ways to engross yourself in the Warhammer franchise without ever leaving your house. Part 1. Hobbying. I figured I should start with the most obvious. Fellas, we all have it. We all know the feeling of I'll do it another time, of constantly putting off your personal projects. And because of that, you have, more than likely, as a Warhammer fan, accrued a massive pile of plastic shame. But do not fear. You're stuck indoors, so that landfill-sized pile of plastic sprues, you have plenty of time to get through it all. Personally, I used this time to work through a box of Necrons I had set aside for later. Of course, I actually ran out of lead belcher in the middle of painting them, and I had to stop. That does lead into the issue with relying solely on painting to get your Warhammer kicks during this quarantine. No easy access to new stuff. Run out of a specific paint? Too bad. With Games Workshop's online shipping still being closed in many parts of the world, there's not much that can be done if you want to get that specific Citadel paint pot that you just ran out of. Or maybe you did really run out of models to finish painting and don't have that many options to get more. However, I'm speaking from an entirely American perspective. Hobby stuff has always been hard to find here. The quarantine just made it so much worse. There is, however, a place where that wasn't as much of a problem before the quarantine. The United Kingdom. However, I had no way of knowing what it was really like over in the UK right now, so I got in touch with the YouTube duo Snipe and Wib in order to answer some questions about the state of the hobby during these trying times from a UK perspective, and they graciously accepted, so I'll let them speak on the matter.
Hi there, we're Snipe and Wib, and Samantha's asked us a bunch of questions about what tabletop gaming is like during the current UK lockdown. How has the quarantine affected your ability to indulge in the hobby?
Quite a bit. So in the UK, most stuff has been shut down, and that includes obviously things like Games Workshop themselves. So it's meant that, we can't go out anywhere to game with our friends because we're not allowed. We haven't been able to buy anything if it wasn't from like a third-party reseller, and their stuff's been, ran out of stock pretty quickly. And since Games Workshop until a few days ago, at the time of recording, has been closed, it's not been particularly easy. I mean, we're lucky because we live together, so if we want to play a game, we can. But if you didn't, kind of out of luck. How have you been actively participating in the hobby since the quarantine started?
Just engaging with people on Twitter and painting models, really.
Not much else you can do, really.
Not much else, yeah. Is it all that much harder to find supplies for the painting side of the hobby? New models, new paints, etc.?
It's been pretty bad because, again, with Games Workshop being closed until really recently, you've really been at the mercy of third-party sellers, or if you're kind of a little easier if you don't use GW's paints, because some of those are stored in various places around the world, so it's not so much a big deal. But it's been pretty difficult. We are currently still waiting on our paints arriving from GW, actually. So it's been a time. What are some ways you recommend people who are looking to further the experience of the Warhammer universe despite tabletop gaming being more or less unavailable?
I would say engage in social media platforms like, 40k groups. You can probably find like a group to play digitally with, like using Tabletop Simulator, which is not a particularly elegant solution, but it is completely workable. And yeah, just get involved that way. Do you think in the long run this quarantine will affect how Games Workshop does business, i.e. getting more invested in digital distribution of their rule sets like with Age of Sigmar's online War Scrolls?
It's a definite possibility. I think it's safe to say that given the general nature of how the pandemic's kind of gone down and how much it's affected business, not just like in the wargaming sphere, but just
business as a whole.
In the wide sphere that is a globe that is the Earth we live on. It means that, all bets are kind of off. We don't know what's going to happen, and I can totally see that some companies who are like Games Workshop, who rely a lot on physical print, might start looking into things that they can have a bit more control over. And digital's kind of the ultimate way of doing that, because then they're not beholden to having to physically get it out to stores and things.
Yeah.
So it's possible.
Hope that helped, and thank you for having us.
However, painting is only one half of the hobby, and the other half is the actual war game. Believe it or not, it's still possible to play the game. As Snipe pointed out, there is a frankly stunningly large community on Discord of people who play the game on Tabletop Simulator. It's kind of rudimentary, rough around the edges, but it's dirt cheap in comparison to actual tabletop, and it can be very easily done with players across the nation and beyond. It may not have the same sort of satisfying physical feeling as the actual tabletop, and you may not be playing with the models you made yourself, but for those who may be strapped for cash or are stuck in quarantine, it's a great substitution for the real thing. Part 2, Black Library. If you're watching this video, you're probably already a Warhammer fan, so you also probably have a bookshelf full of Dan Abnett or Nick Kime or Graham McNeil or Chris Raitt or Guy Haley, or you get the point. Warhammer, as a franchise, is such an expansive collection of stories and adventures that if you delve into the gigantic expanded universe part of the hobby, you'll be set for life. There are so many books between the 3 major Warhammer continuities, and some of them are genuinely some of the best written literature of all time. Specifically, a lot of the stuff to come out of the Horus Heresy novel series is pure gold. There is such a volume of novels in both digital, audio, and physical formats that you will, for the most part, never run out of consistently amazing fiction to read. If you wanted to keep exploring the 3 Warhammer continuities, but with IRL tabletop being unavailable, I would wholeheartedly suggest delving into the myriad collection of audiobooks and ebooks that are available on the Black Library online store, or look at the variety of audiobooks here on YouTube. The only issue, just like with a lot of these, is availability and price. If you want a hardback cover of Fulgrim the Palatine Phoenix, you're kinda out of luck. As Wib pointed out, you're kind of at the mercy of third-party distributors with a lot of these things, and because of that, it can be very hard to get your hands on some of the books, digital or otherwise. Part 3, Role-Playing Games. Warhammer is a franchise spread across wildly diverse mediums and genres, many of which allow you to craft your own adventures and make your own impact on the universe at large. One of which are the Fantasy Flight Warhammer Tabletop RPGs. I'm an avid Tabletop RPG player, and I've tried a myriad of different systems. Dungeon mastering is how I actually got into writing, and now I'm actually trying to be a writer. However, out of all the different systems and settings I've played with, not one comes close to Fantasy Flight's systems. The reason I keep saying Fantasy Flight's systems and not just the name of a system is because the systems are completely modular with one another. There are 5 Fantasy Flight Warhammer 40k tabletop RPGs. Dark Heresy, Rogue Trader, Deathwatch, Black Crusade, and Only War. The reason there are so many different games is that each of them is geared toward a different part of the universe. Dark Heresy has you playing as a party of Inquisitors and other such legal authorities within the Imperium. Rogue Trader has you playing as a crew of wandering space merchants and adventurers looking to chart unknown parts of the galaxy and make good coin out of it too. Deathwatch has you playing as members of the, well, Deathwatch. Space Marine Alien Hunters, it's basically Tabletop XCOM. Black Crusade has you playing as Chaos Worshippers, and Only War lets you play as Guardsmen. Splitting the systems up this many ways, despite, the games being entirely modular with one another, really gives each game the ability to go super in-depth in making each of the different ways you can play unique. You can, for the most part, make a character in any of these systems, and with almost no adjustments or homebrew at all, easily port them over to a different book. Maybe you're playing Only War, but your character falls to Chaos. Make some minor adjustments, and you can play them in Black Crusade. Not only does this mean it can give each of the different ways to play the depth and uniqueness it deserves, it also means that you can play with multiple systems. The books, however, are largely out of print and are really prohibitively expensive to get physical copies of, but you can find all the rulebooks in PDF form on places like the Trove. I personally suggest wrangling some friends into a Discord server in order to play these, because frankly, it is just too wonderful to pass up. Part 4. Video games. Video games have been a part of the Warhammer universe since about as long as Warhammer itself has existed. Hero Quest, released in 1991, was the first Warhammer Fantasy video game, an adaptation of the Warhammer Fantasy spin-off board game of the same name, and a year later we got Space Crusade, based on Warhammer 40,000. Ever since 1991, we have had around 85 games released between the three major Warhammer continuities. That's, on average, 2.5 games a year, for 29 years. Holy shit. And there's some serious masterpieces in that list as well. I suggest you check out my video on Dawn of War to learn why the first 2 games in that series are great, and why the third one was made by some total smooth brains. But seriously, there are some real strategy classics, such as Total War Warhammer and the aforementioned Dawn of War. That's nothing to say of the action games featured within either. Eternal Crusade, despite being basically completely dead except for a small pocket of incredibly devout players, is an interesting and honestly fascinating take on a Battlefront or PlanetSide style game taking place in the 40k universe. The game from which it's based, the game it was supposed to replace in the wake of GameSpy's demise, simply titled Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine, is a contender for not just one of the best Warhammer games, but one of the best third-person shooters, period. Vermintide 2 is similarly amazing. My personal favorite take on the Horde survival FPS genre. Really one of the few games that has good, visceral, satisfying first-person melee combat. You will not be starved for digital interactive media within the grim darkness of the far future. Part 5. Conclusion. So, I had this whole pre-written conclusion that I had written down, but it felt fake. So I'm just gonna go off the cuff. This video was hard to write. I've been doing this for a while, and this was easily one of the hardest videos I ever tried to make, because I didn't want to make the video super depressed or dull or grim, because that is everywhere right now. It just is. It's everywhere. That sort of almost suicidal, defeatist attitude of society is completely fucked is basically unescapable. And I didn't want to bring that here. So I guess the moral of this video is just to enjoy, actually. That's it, yeah. Just enjoy things. Even though right now it seems like there's so much darkness in the world. Just, even if it's hard to keep going or whatever, you just need to hold on to the things that you enjoy in life. Because that's all we have right now. It's all we ever had, actually. I didn't think I would get, emotional making this video. But I wanted to give a special thanks to Snipe and Wib, who, despite me being a literal nobody, were just like, yeah, we'll make a video with you, why not? That's just, they were so nice and they were so sort of cooperative and so willing to hear out my bullshit that they're the real MVPs, and their cameo really made me want to make this video as good as it can be. So, I would say just, enjoy yourself. Don't be don't be depressed. No. You can't really avoid being depressed, but attempt to mitigate it by staying positive and trying to stay happy. If you want to see more of my videos, subscribe, leave a like, bell, all that bullshit. I have a pile of games that I intend on making videos on, which you can see on the screen right now. And if you want any games added to this list, just comment them down below, just be like, hey, I want you to talk about whatever game, and I will consider adding it to the pile. Also, in the description, you can find my WordPress blog, Sally's Forge. And Sally's Forge is where I occasionally post my writing, my fiction. I write fiction, and I post it there sometimes. And that's something I've been doing since about April. Yeah, so if you want to see more content from me, you know what to do. Have a wonderful day, or evening, or night, and see you around, Space Cowboy. Oh, I suck!
Dark